Now let me tell you what Bay City Capital is doing that's different. We're investing selectively in innovation. So while our Fund 6, which we're raising right now, will indeed go through the typical VC bars, we have a Pharma Innovation Fund, we have an Israel Innovation Fund, and we have a China Fund. And these are sector funds, and these are selectively directed at very early stage opportunities. For instance, the Pharma Innovation Fund is a fund where we're going to actually work with the pharmaceutical companies to identify in advance what they are looking for specifically to fill in their pipelines. And they're going to be a partner at the table, and we're going to be developing what they want rather than coming up with some invention, some new chemical entity, a new enzyme, a new molecule, and finding out how it works, and then later seeing whether that can be sold to the big pharma companies. So we're going to be working with them selectively. The Israel Innovation Fund, this is selectively for the, obviously for the state of Israel. The amount of innovation that comes out of Israel is tremendous. It is, insofar as the biopharmaceutical end of things, largely untapped, or it's stolen out of the country, let's say, at a very early stage for very, very small prices. And what the government is doing, having really acknowledged what's been going on with biopharmaceuticals and pharmaceuticals, is selectively investing in that area. So they have a $24 million anchor investment, and that needs to be matched. And I won't get into all of the details. It needs to be more than matched, but need to have at least 100 million, so at least another 75 brought to the table. But it's very favorable for the LPs. Israel's done this previously with communications and the IT industry, and developed a very, very good venture capital industry. And they did it with devices as well, medical devices. And that turned out very well. And there's a very strong medical device venture capital industry. And they're hoping that this initiative will bring into Israel a very thriving venture capital industry that will be directed specifically at biopharmaceuticals and pharmaceutical products. With that, again, I'd like to thank you and look forward to following the success stories of MaRS innovation.
Now, the reason I invited both John and Michael to come, aside from our familial relationship, was...
John is also family?
Pardon me?
John is also family?
No. He's not. No. He's from New York. He lives not too far from my son in New York. The purpose of bringing these two gentlemen here was, I think, a bit of a counter-narrative in the sense that we've been told why things aren't happening here, and I think these two gentlemen have said how things could happen here. John has got a wonderful VC model. I call it a VC model. I think it's an enticing one because he not only helps the front end, but the back end, but the middle end, but on top of that, he provides services to young startup companies. And I think this is a really important and quite an innovative model, and that's why I thought John should come and tell his story here, and he is doing business here, and I hope he does more in our city. And Michael, here's the interesting part that I found why I think Michael was so critical to this narrative and this dialogue. Within 100 yards of this building is some of the greatest research institutes in the world. Within 100 yards of this building, Mount Sinai, the Toronto General Hospital, the Sick Kids Hospital, and of course, one of my favorite hospitals, and that is the Princess Margaret Hospital. And I say that because unbelievable research and innovation is being done in those four centers within 100 yards of here. That's to the good. The bad problem is that we do not have seed capital investment or first stage investment to take those innovations and commercialize them. And I hope that Michael, I've induced Michael to come here in the hope that he will establish his expertise, and we're going to take him around to the government and to some banks and so on in order for him to do this. Because the one thing that we're lacking in this city is seed capital for pharma. And it is, when I went to Israel, I discovered that this was a big hole in Israel and that they're fighting to do this. And this is something I think that if there's any message that comes out of this forum to the governments and to the banks and to the private sector, to the angels, and as well as to the pension funds, that this is what we need. This is our future. We have unbelievable talent here, and our idea is to bridge this particular, as they call it, to provide some oasis in this desert of lack of investment. So now I'm going to turn it open to you to ask some questions, but I want to thank them very much, and I just want to explain the rationale for bringing these two gentlemen here. It's up to you now. We'll take questions.
Thank you very much for coming. Senator, the question is for you, because it would seem to me that we have a tremendous amount of intellectual capital. We've got a number of models that have been used in other jurisdictions, but what we don't have is alignment. We don't have the alignment of the various levels of government working together to achieve this power in the sector. And part of the reason is that we're very healthy and wealthy from things that we don't need to work very hard to make money on in this country. And so it takes leadership. And I think that's been one of the challenges that our country has faced, is we don't have the leadership at the levels of government to work together in order to bring gentlemen who know how it's done and help us. And having Canadians offshore and other countries doing really well, I think, is a tremendous gateway. So the question is to you, what are you going to be doing in the hallowed halls of power?
Well, first of all, I'm no longer a senator, but I'm a former senator, and one of the reasons I'm doing this is because I spent 26 years representing Toronto, and my goal was always how do we continue to make Toronto the engine of growth in Canada, which it was. And quite frankly, we're failing. And we're failing not so much because of government, because governments are broke. The federal government's broke, the provincial government's broke. I mean, the provincial government can't even afford enough money to deal with the gridlock in the city. And the city's broke. So the question is, when you're confronted with this reality, what do you do? Well, first of all, you turn to what made this country great in the past, and that is individual entrepreneurs. This forum, MaRS, is all about entrepreneurship, about investors who take risks. And when people say to me, and I think this morning it was a very interesting comment, when people say, well, gee, we don't do risk. We lend things. And I say to myself, excuse me, and somebody asked a very good question to Mr. Nixon this morning, why is it that we have a culture of lending high-risk capital to mines, but not to technology? Maybe that's the history of the country. But the truth of it is, if you take a look at, and this, I think this is a statistic, probably 20% of all investments in mines are successful. The other 80% is pump and dump. And quite frankly, here the tech sector will have a much higher rate of return. I mean, Michael's just told us that we've got a crying need to come with medical intervention in things that affect our lives, from cancer to diabetes and so on. The need is there. The market is there. The research is 100 yards away. And the question is, where is the capital going to come from? Well, the capital is not going to come from government. Government can feed it a little bit. But at the end of the day, it's going to come from the huge wealth that's been accumulated in the boomer generation. There's the largest transfer of wealth in the history of mankind that's taking place in North America. And the question is, how do we redirect it into innovation for the future? So I'm not relying on government. The purpose of MaRS is not, hopefully, just to rely on government. That's a cop-out. The real question is, why don't the institutions, the rich, wealthy people of this city, invest in innovation, not abroad, but right here? So the whole focus of my attention, my time when I come back to Toronto, is to do exactly that, to focus on the investment, the large pools of capital that are in the city within 300 yards of this place, and to put those two things together. And the whole idea is to entice people to do this. You can't expect people to take a risk, but when you listen to Michael and you listen to John, they are making money. They're doing well. Their rates of return are excellent. So this is a way to make money, and we just have to put these two pieces together. So I hope that the hospitals are here. The hospitals have very wealthy members on their board. Yet they're not doing their job, in my view. They're not doing their job in terms of bringing innovation to hospitals, and they themselves investing in some of these. They're brought on boards of hospitals. They have 50 or 60 of the wealthiest people that are on boards of hospitals here, and including this place, including MaRS Innovation. They're very wealthy and very successful. Well, why don't they take a little bit of their own dough and invest it in seed capital? Why not? Take 5%. I'm doing it in my own way, and I'm not as wealthy as any of the people on any of the boards, but that's what I do. I try to get kids and ideas and bring them together. So my answer is, don't rely on government. I've been there. It's slow. It won't happen. They can help. You'll pay 80. If you're an entrepreneur, and you'll spend 85% of your time trying to get your seed capital from government. Don't do it. It won't work, and it'll take a lot of time. Just take a look at what's around you, and what is genius? Genius is a penetrating glimpse into the obvious. And to my mind is, here's angels we know. They're board members. Take a look at every board of every hospital within 100 yards of here. There's hundreds of millions of dollars of wealth there. And that's why they're on the board, a lot of them. So let's tap some of that funds to start with in some of the seed capital that these two guys can put to deploy and give them a rate of return. So I'm a contrarian here, and I end my speech by that.
Can you give us their telephone number?
Sure. My number is 416. The numbers are in the book. They're in the book. I'm sorry I gave it. That was too long an answer, but that was my rationale for coming to help Rafi to put MaRS in the leading edge of this. We're, as he said, a macher. What's a macher? It's really a matchmaker. And to match great ideas and great entrepreneurs and great capital into one place where everybody wins. We create jobs, we create innovation, we improve productivity, and we make money. What a formula for success. And that's the essence of Toronto. That's what Toronto should be built on. And we were built on that. And the whole idea is stop depending on government. They won't come to your rescue because they got no dough.